So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to friends, colleagues, and connections. So today, I have a great pleasure to invite Luke Evetts to discuss several things associated with company formations, what to look for, what kind of organization and structures you should employ, and what kind of things you should look for in terms of getting close into a partnership or a limited company with different people, and what ultimately are the pitfalls. I'm sure Luke has seen many great successes and equally many great
Mm.
failures. So maybe Luke, you could maybe tell the listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Paul, for the invite to speak with you today. So, I'm a solicitor. I specialise in corporate and commercial law. I also do a little bit of employment law and intellectual property, and I tend to focus on supporting SMEs with all of their legal needs. So I'm originally from Ceredigion in deepest, darkest West Wales, and I went to university in Aberystwyth. And after I left university, I went and worked in-house as a lawyer for a business, and then later on I worked for a legal expenses insurer, dealing with a huge range of different legal issues. Currently, I act as a consultant solicitor for Penguin Legal Services. So my focus with Penguin is supporting small and medium enterprises to try and tackle some of the issues I think we're going to be discussing today.
Great. You've clearly helped many people set up their own businesses, and maybe we could discuss some of the legal steps people should take when they want to actually start a new business.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're starting a business, I think the focus is on the idea, the concept. You know what the business is about, and I think that segues quite nicely into marketing, PR. How you interact with people through social media, how you're going to make the business a success. And there are an awful lot of distractions when you're setting up a business. There are an awful lot of people who want to have your attention. You can spend a lot of money setting up a business that you don't necessarily need, and at a time when a lot of people don't have that much money to spend either. You're in the infancy. And if you look at the list of things people are looking at, right at the bottom, if it's on there at all, are the legal sides. People are excited about the concept, but actually how they go about setting up the business. Not everybody. Some people are more technically minded, but people, I think, in business tend to be excited about the concept and the idea, and actually going through something that they think is quite dry, company law, partnership law, that sort of thing, is sort of put on the back burner, and that's fine. Actually, no, it's not fine, but it's fine in moderation, so long as it gets dealt with. And the big problem is if people don't plan ahead, they don't think about these things. So hopefully I can talk you through some of the options, some of the pitfalls today, just to help some of the listeners.
What kind of options and are there for structuring your business, and what are the different pros and cons thereof?
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, when you're looking at setting up a business, I think what I would ask myself is, right, how easy is it to set up the business, and how easy is it and expensive is it to continue to manage that business vehicle? And then there's also tax considerations, and then also liability. Those are the sort of the four brackets that I would look at. And so you can set up your business as a sole trader, just in your own name, which is very basic. You just have to notify HMRC, you file an annual tax return, you pay your income tax and national insurance, and it's all fairly straightforward, fairly simple. The downside of that is the liability side. So what happens if anything goes wrong? So you're trading in your own name. So if you know, Paul Northey, trading as himself, loses money in the year, and you know you've got a loan, you can't make the repayments. Well, it's your house, it's your assets that are on the line. You as an individual who could be made bankrupt. Um, so then the second sort of common vehicle then is you have partnerships, and that's where two or more people come together to form a business, and those individuals are treated as individuals for tax purposes. So they file their own returns, and what they do is they take money from the partnership business overall as drawings, and so they have to pay their tax. They submit their tax return on that, but you still have the issue of personal liability. And in fact, with partnerships, it can be worse than that, because you are what we call jointly and severally liable.
Okay.
So if one of the partners gets into difficulty, they can't make their contributions towards the partnership, it gets into difficulty, you can have to cover their
Yes.
default, you know. So you know, there are risks involved there. So then the sort of third major one is the limited company, you know. And so no, it's called a limited company because your liability is limited.
Yeah.
You know, the company is its own legal entity. It's its own. It can enter into agreements in
Yeah.
its own name. And so, if there is an issue, then the liability falls to the company, not to you as an individual, unless you've done something catastrophically wrong, something negligent or criminal. You know,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, it's safer that way. But then on the other side, it's a little bit more involved. It's fairly easy to set up, but there are ongoing considerations. So you have to submit your annual accounts to Companies House. You have to you know, it's made public. There's certain public information that you have to have, and also from a tax perspective as well. So you pay corporation tax at 19% on taxable profits, basically. And then if you want to pay yourself out of that, then you need to take that as a salary, as PAYE, or as dividends.
Yeah.
And so you end up paying tax on your salary or on your dividends. So it's a bit more complicated when it comes to tax. Just to confuse the situation a little bit for you, I'll throw in a fourth one, and then you have a limited liability partnership, which is sort of a hybrid now between a partnership and a limited company.
Okay.
So no, those are the main options.
Yeah.
You know, and it's important to understand the differences between each one. So some of the benefits, some of the pros, some of the cons about it.
Good. That's good, and I think you can quite easily see ultimately where things could go wrong in a partnership with a joint liability with multiple partners. And I think the protection a limited company provides you is something that ultimately needs, I think, from my personal experience, needs expert. Setting up the company is quite simple. I've done it myself. You know, it's
Yes.
£12 at Companies
Yep.
House, but
Yep.
the impacts and the after processes need to be in place, and the expertise needs to be in alignment. Yeah, it's probably not something maybe somebody for the first time should maybe leap into without some consideration. So I guess you know, most businesses, they come up with an idea. That's the real spark of creativity. And pretty soon afterwards, they want to give the company a name, right? Which so how do you go about registering a name or making sure your name is unique? How does that process work?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, you've got the practical sides, the marketing and the PR, and you know what sort of name, your brand, and you can come up with the best name in the world. It'd be fantastic. You're going to take the world by storm, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can call your company that. So there are rules about what you can call your company. So you know, you can't have anything that is the same as an existing company, or that is too similar. Or you can't have anything that's misleading or offensive, you know. You know, most companies have to specify that they are limited, on the end, so they're limited Ltd,
Mm.
or yn Gymraeg cyfyngedig neu cyf am beth. So there's a Welsh equivalent as well. So there are limitations in terms of what you can call
Yeah,
the company.
okay.
In
So,
terms of how you go searching for it, so you can go onto the Companies House website. As I said, the documents about companies are generally public,
yeah,
and so you can do a search on the Companies House website for existing companies that have got that name. It's also worth having a look and seeing if there's anything similar and in a similar sort of field as well. So, you might consider slightly different spelling variations,
yeah.
for instance. Um,
If I was to
um,
set up let's call it a cola company called Coca-Cola, I guess
yes,
uh, that might be approved in Companies House, but I'm sure the massive legal team at Coca-Cola would be very interested.
yeah. So that's, I mean, that, yeah, exactly. So you have the whole concept of setting up the business, but then you also have the intellectual property side as
Yeah,
well. So what might get through Companies House as being slightly as sufficiently different from an existing company
yeah,
might not get past the lawyers
yeah,
for some of these big companies, and that's what you hear about some of these David and Goliath battles,
yeah, yeah.
don't you?
Yeah, there's a local restaurant near where I live that uses a Disney character
Yeah,
in its advertising, and I often look at it and think, you're either paying an enormous legal fee, licensing fee, or you are just ignoring the red letters
yeah,
from
yeah.
most solicitors.
Yeah,
I
I
guess
don't know.
I'm pretty sure Disney would clearly win that one, but they seem to have been doing it for years, which surprises me.
Yes.
So that brings us on to IP. So how do you ultimately check for existing IP? And if you believe that your IP is unique and doesn't clash with other organizations or products, etc., how would you go about licensing
Mm.
that IP and ultimately protecting your either your brand or your product or its name or something similar?
Yeah, I mean, intellectual property is a vast area of law in and of itself, and there are different ways that your brand, your ideas can be protected. So you've got things like copyright, which covers original and creative work. So music and books are the things that people usually associate it with,
Yeah.
and there isn't any sort of register for that in the UK. You know, it's automatically covered if it is original creative content.
Yeah.
So you have your copyrights, then you have your patents. So that's something that can be made or something that can be used, it can be designed, and that has to be new and innovative. You know,
Yeah.
so you might have a business, you come up with a technical product, and you think it's different from what's been before. You might patent that,
Yeah.
and that's again a very that's a complicated area in and of itself,
Yeah.
really. I think what most people in business tend to come across are trademarks, and so trademarks are words or symbols, or sometimes there's something a little bit more abstract,
Yeah.
but they are things which you associate with your brand or your product, and
Mm.
there is a register of trademarks in the UK at the UK Intellectual Property Office, and so you can go online and you can do a
Okay.
search for
Yeah.
existing designs, existing
Yeah.
words, existing phrases. Um, and the other thing that is underrated actually is going on to Google. You know, you can
Yeah.
you can
Very
do an
true.
awful
Yes.
lot of research
Yes.
nowadays going through Google,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so you hear celebrities trying to trademark certain stock phrases or
Yes.
certain
Yeah.
companies,
Yeah.
you know, trying to protect their intellectual property rights, as they say it, and you know it is interesting, because actually setting up a trademark again is fairly straightforward. There are technical aspects. It really does depend on
Yeah.
what you're doing, but if you have if you're just registering a word as a trademark, and that word is something that is clearly related to your business, it isn't
Yeah,
misleading anyway, then that's actually quite a straightforward process. You can do it all online these days.
yeah, yeah.
But I would always say it's worth taking quality legal. I always say it's worth taking quality legal advice, preferably through me, if I'm
Of course.
perfectly honest.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
I'm highly recommended, by the way, Luke.
oh well, thank you very much. Thank you. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's another aspect, and you were talking about that business by you. I mean, there is something in intellectual property law called passing off,
Okay.
and that's where you make a business or a product look like somebody
Yeah.
else's, and so the originator of the idea is protected
Yes.
from somebody passing their work off as
Yeah.
somebody else, and
There
so
are,
you
there are
see these.
certain German supermarkets that seem to specialize in this.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Let's call it brand diffusion. Yeah.
yes, yes. Well,
Where,
it's interesting. Yes,
where patterns, coloring, even
yes,
the primary words are similar, but
yes,
I guess flattery is
yes.
copying
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah.
out of flattery, but ultimately they seem to carry on with this.
Yes. No, I thought the same as I was eating my bowl of special Q this morning. Um, so yeah, but I mean there was I don't know whether any of your listeners will remember, but not all that long ago there was something in the media about Mr. Singh, who set up his corner shop as Singsbury's,
Yeah,
and had
yeah,
sorry. No, he'd set up his shop as Sainsbury's, and he decked it all out in orange and white. And he had a letter
yeah.
to come to him from the legal team at a certain supermarket. I don't know whether your listeners will be able to guess who that came from, but they weren't too happy about it. And he
No, I
said,
can imagine.
nothing to do with it. I mean,
Yeah,
interestingly enough, the test for passing off, going back, was the moron in a hurry. No, not particularly PC, but
okay.
would a moron in a hurry make the mistake? Would they think that Sainsbury's was
Yes, that's
Sainsbury's?
yeah.
And so that was, and
You
that,
just give it away.
yeah, exactly. I know. I've spoilt it now. But yeah, so that was from a case, I think, in the 70s, Morning Star and the Express, or something like that. But that's been referred to as recently as 2006. There was a court case
Yeah.
between Apple of iPad fame and Apple computers
Ah,
over the
okay.
use of the Apple. And so
Yeah,
they get
yeah,
into technical arguments. Oh well, this is a clean design with bite taken out of it. Oh, this is a Granny Smith, and
yes, yeah.
but
Yeah,
that's the test anyway. That
yeah, but I kind of like your passing test as a kind of starting point to at least appreciate uh, whether you are in the right or wrong. But ultimately, you have to have pretty deep pockets to take on the big
mm,
guys,
mm,
right?
mm.
And that's maybe where people
Yeah,
either stick to their guns and or change fairly rapidly. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I've you mentioned Disney as well. You have Disney characters. I mean, I see ice cream vans. Ice cream vans are terrible for
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
You
you're
see,
right.
they all have these characters on, and you just think to yourself, I'm not convinced about that. And I think they just take the risk.
Yeah,
It's a
I
clear
guess
breach.
they're probably not contactable, right? They'll have to actually send somebody from Florida to
To go
buy,
buy an ice cream.
to actually go buy an ice cream, which might be a bit of a challenge to do that around the world.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And they've got deeper pockets, as you say. So, but I don't know whether it'll whether their pockets are deep enough to send somebody several thousand miles to go and buy a Mr. Whippy.
Yes, I think maybe they're more concerned about their ultimate profit margins.
Mm, mm,
So we talked about IP. When ultimately, when people come together to form businesses, what kind of agreements should they maybe put together in terms of high level
mm,
description of operation or expectations?
mm,
What kind of things should and ultimately, I guess with a limited company, you ultimately talk about shareholdings.
mm-hmm.
How would you typically approach this?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, when you set up a business, I mean, you might do it on your own. It's very important if you are entering into business with anybody else that you have some sort of document in place to set out how that business is structured. So you can enter into a business with other professionals, or it could be an investor, or it could be families, friends, people that you think, yeah, we've always got on really well. You throw that business dynamic in the mix, and it might be fine, it might go well, but if it does go wrong, especially with friends and families, actually it can go catastrophically wrong. And
Yeah.
that's where trying to think ahead really does pay dividends. So potentially literally actually pay dividends. But if you set up a partnership, as we were talking about, well, you don't have to have a partnership agreement in place, but I would always recommend it, because if you don't have a partnership agreement, then the rules that govern it come from the Partnership Act 1890. So you're
Okay.
relying on a 19th century piece of legislation
Yeah.
to to
Incredible.
to govern that. Now with companies, you mentioned it's quite easy to set up a company. It's 12 quid on Companies House. You can do it online.
Yeah.
You just need to identify the directors and the shareholders and the different people, and also you have to have articles of association, and those are the basic rules that govern the way that the company is to be run. So you can just select the model articles. These are very straightforward rules about how you run the company. But there is a framework there, but they are basic, and so the key for me with these things is to plan ahead. So what you do is you consider the worst case scenarios, and from personal experience, I will meet with the client and talk them through these things, and sometimes they come out of these meetings are a bit shell shocked because they haven't actually thought about all of these things. They're ashen faced at the end of it, thinking, oh my. Whew. You think about, well, what happens on death? What happens if
Yeah. Well,
die?
yeah, you're right.
What
And
happens with
yeah, and
critical
I think that
illness, or
that
you know
brings me on to the next question. What happens when things do go wrong? As you say, maybe a shareholder wants to cash out, maybe a partner wants to pull out, maybe there's a whole range of scenarios. What happens if somebody's long-term sick? Even
mm,
there's
mm, mm,
a multitude of things which ultimately should, at least the framework should be written down
yeah, yeah,
in terms of the agreements we just discussed. But when things do go wrong, uh, I guess you're kind of it's A versus B, and how does this situation ever get resolved? Yeah?
yeah. Well, I mean, my preference is you sit down at the beginning and you think about death or critical illness. What happens if somebody loses mental capacity? What happens if somebody gets divorced, or if there's a falling out? And you work through the scenarios when you're all thinking straight at the
Yes.
beginning of it and everything's good, and then you can set out an agreement. So if it's a limited company, you can have a shareholders agreement. If it's a
Yeah.
partnership, then you have a partnership agreement. And if anything goes wrong, if it's drafted properly by a professional, you can then turn to it if things go
Yeah.
wrong later on down the road, and you can think, right, well, there's an issue here. This is what we do. If you haven't done that, then what you're doing is you're relying on you and your business partners being able to take a step back and being objective
Yeah.
about it, and that's the difficulty. So
Yeah.
you might take the view, actually, do you know what, we've got this issue, let's try and resolve it. So you think, right, well, how can we actually practically solve this problem? If there isn't a if there's a shareholders agreement, sometimes I will include like a cooling off period. You step back
Yeah.
and you do some sort of negotiation. After 2 weeks, nobody can do anything for that period until you cool down. There are other options. So you can have mediation or arbitration, or an independent third party coming in,
Yeah.
and that can defuse a situation. If you don't have that sort of thing in place, then you need to be asking yourself, well, what are the options here to get out of the situation? So can I buy this other person out? Can I sell the business,
Yeah.
as a whole, and get out of it? And the more dispute that there is, the longer it's going to take, the more stress it's going to be, and the more money it's going to cost you. When these things go to court, there's only one group of people who make the money, and that's us lawyers. That's
Yeah.
that's it. And so it's just so important. I mean, and that's why it's so important to actually get everything down in writing. So there was a recent case that I saw in the paper with I think it's the AMT coffee chain. You see them somewhere, and so there was a big dispute. It was a family-run business, and it went to court. It cost tens of thousands of pounds, maybe more, in legal fees. And the judge said, well, if you'd had a partnership agreement in place, if you had a proper agreement in place,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be here
Yeah.
today
Yeah.
doing that. So that there are, just because you don't have an agreement doesn't mean that it's going to be the end of the world, but you're relying on yourself and others being able to take that step back. My advice: always have an agreement, although you don't want to think about these things at the beginning.
Yes.
It's
I guess it's almost like a prenup, right? In terms of
yes,
a business partnership is some form of relationship, and ultimately you have to plan for the hopefully the great times and the good times, and you have to have a mitigation or a contingency for what happens when this goes wrong. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think your advice is sage-like, and people would be well advised to listen and to actually get this sorted out in the early phases of their business, yeah, rather than think about it far too late down the line. So this brings me to my ultimately my final question, Luke. I hope this isn't a big surprise, but ultimately I'd like you to tell the listeners and viewers something about surprising about yourself.
I don't know how. Now, in terms of your listeners, I don't know how surprised they would be about things and what their tolerance are. So I'll have to moderate it.
Yeah,
But no, I mean, I suppose I very nearly wasn't a lawyer. When I was might be sad, but I wanted to be a lawyer from when I was from about the age of 12. I blame Perry Mason. Um, you know, I,
yeah.
for anyone listening, it's not like Perry Mason at all. It's a little bit different. You don't solve crimes and find the murderer, and that's how you prove it. No, it's not like that at all.
That's such a disappointment.
No, but I did have I did have a blip sort of when I was 15, 16, 17, 18. And I was a pretty decent golfer,
Oh,
and so I considered turning professional
right. Okay.
at golf.
Yeah.
And so I suppose that might be a little bit surprising.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
must say it was a good decision that I didn't, because I'm quite a good lawyer. I'm not such a good golfer anymore. The two might be linked somehow.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure you can do some business on the green. So I guess
A little bit.
there's some kind of synergy between both tests. Diolch yn fawr, and thank you very much for giving your time today, Luke. It's been really interesting. It's also been fun. And ultimately, I hope viewers and listeners will have learned a lot and considered several topics on company formation. I guess everything we talk about is within the framework of UK law, and many of my contacts are worldwide, so you probably need to take maybe some local representation, but I think the basic principles pretty much hold around the world. And I guess the British legal system, or I should call it the English legal system of Scotland, is different.
Yeah.
Is stamped out or in many places around the world for good or bad. So thank you again, Luke, and it's been a great pleasure. And clearly from my personal experience, you've given me a lot of great advice on my journey. And your advice is always, I always make sure I listen to everything you say and absorb everything, and I look forward to keeping our business and personal relationship moving forward.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
So thanks again. And if anyone wants to contact Luke, there will be a link to Luke's LinkedIn page. So I'm sure Luke's link will be available. Put my teeth in.
Hey, there's some marketing there, isn't
Yeah,
there?
there you go. You can put that in the IP.
Yes,
And then
yes.
try to trademark that, so you can have that one. And please contact Luke. Clearly, he's a solicitor, not an advisor, or somebody that is going to give you a lot of advice. But I'm sure if you wanted to connect up on a business sense, then I'm sure Luke would do a great job for you. So please feel free to contact him. I'm sure he would be open and delighted to hear from many of you. So thanks again, Luke, and all the best.
Thank you, Paul.
Pleasure.